Great day, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Strategic Possibilities Show, where we discuss success and growth to help you launch potential in your personal and professional life. My name is Emmett Ferguson, and I'm your host. And today I'm here with Mary Poffenroth. Mary Poffenroth has spoken at TEDx, and she's done many wonderful things, but I'd like to let you, Mary, introduce yourself a bit more about what it is you do. It's very interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I do a lot of things. I would say that the foundation of my work is definitely rooted in academia. I've been a university professor in biology for the last almost 12 years. And part of that is being an academic. We really have the freedom to be able to explore new and novel things. And for me, I really start to bring in a holistic approach to looking at everyday non-clinical fear. So I come at human fear in a way that brings together biology, psychology, and communication studies to kind of get this big ball of strategy that is rooted in evidence and science to help people that are dealing with not necessarily clinical stuff, but just the everyday fears that all of us are having to struggle with each and every day, from fear of failure or FOMO, fear of missing out, and really trying to flip the script and change the conversation on what it means to be a human with this very normal, natural emotion of fear, and start to really remove some of that stigma that we have about being afraid. Because really, when it comes to being successful, it means making friends with fear.
Making friends with fear. That's very interesting. And out of curiosity, based on your research, what were some of the main differences between, let's say, a clinical fear that you mentioned, or, the everyday fears such as FOMO, or you said that there was another one you said, I don't know if it's like public speaking or something.
Fear of failure, just kind of,
Okay.
everyday stuff. Yeah. When, I'm very specific on the types of emotions and emotional intelligence that I cover, and having a clinical psychologist is a great way to get through this thing that we call life. But what I do is what we call non-clinical, meaning I'm not a psychotherapist that would see patients at an office. I'm not someone that would prescribe something. So what I'm doing is I am pulling from those three facets of disciplines of biology, communication studies, and psychology, but I'm doing it in a way that's really trying to reach everyone that is not necessarily dealing with a clinical phobia or clinical anxiety. And so that's going to be kind of everyone in the middle of the spectrum, because all of our emotions really lie on a spectrum.
I see. So, why would you pull from so many different avenues, like as opposed to just taking psychology or just taking biology? What's the purpose of, looking at it from so many different ways? How's that beneficial?
Well, there's a couple different things. As we're looking towards the future, it's not going to be siloed as it has been since the start of the academy. That when we look at traditional academics, we have these silos, or these kind of, stay in your lane. So there's only biology, and they don't really talk to psychology, and they don't really talk to communication studies. But that's not how we live as humans. That's not how we are as humans. And so to understand something as complex as a human, you really need to start pulling from the many different disciplines that we spent a lot of time gathering information and not talking to one another. So what I really try to do is not only be cross collaborative in my work and working with other people in these disciplines, but try to bring and distill down this information from these different kind of silos of academic information and make it palatable for people, make it something that they can grab onto and really apply to their daily life.
That's awesome, and I think it's so important when you're, doing any type of research or talking about educational topics related to biology or science to have that application aspect of it. So the fact that you mentioned that it was palatable and that applied aspect of it, I thought this was very great. And I was thinking about fear of failure. How does someone even know? I feel like I hear that on LinkedIn sometimes, and I see an article, and it's like, how do I know if I have a fear of failure? If someone is out there, and whether they're just too scared to do something or whether they're too scared to fail. Where would you define the difference for someone who wants to be successful or wants to overcome a challenge or something?
Well, usually it shows up as not saying yes, thinking that, oh, I can't apply for that job. I'm not qualified enough, or, oh, I couldn't possibly speak at that conference because I'm not ready. I couldn't possibly ask that person out on a date because what if they say no? And it's, really starting to push against those personal boundaries. And everyone's boundary is going to be different. Not everyone is going to be afraid of the same things, where one person can be, very courageous and not, have a care in the world when it comes to talking to people. They may be terrified of trying new things at work. And, the opposite is true. So everyone is going to have their own distinct qualities that they're going to either be courageous in naturally and things that they're going to be a little less courageous in. So when thinking about how do you tell if you are afraid of failing, it usually just shows up as you not trying those things. And, sometimes it comes out as self-sabotage. Maybe the behaviors that you are participating in are not in line with the things that you say that you want. One classic example is, it's the new year, new me. I want to lose
Hmm.
weight and
Right.
I'm going to, drop 20 pounds in a month. And you're saying that that is something that you want in your life and that's a goal, yet your behaviors are not necessarily in line with that. Your behaviors could be, overindulging on donuts, or saying that you want to lose weight, but not really changing anything about your life. And the same goes with, professional success. If you're saying, hey, I want to be a CEO by the time I'm 35, you're like, okay, that's a great goal. What are you doing to get there? What kind of milestones are you setting for yourself? You're like, I don't know, I'll get around to it. And, CEOs don't just happen overnight. And so making the things that you do every day in line with the things that you say that you want is going to be part of trying to get rid of that fear of failure. Because the more that you fail, the more you figure out, it's not so bad, right?
Hmm.
The classic, I'm originally from Silicon Valley. San Jose State University is the Silicon Valley University. And we have a very famous saying in Silicon Valley is fail fast and fail often.
Yeah.
And part of that is, getting to those answers, whether they're a yes or a no, faster. And sometimes people don't even start to ask, and you're never going to hear a yes or a no if you never ask.
Yeah, I like that. And I thought it was so interesting how you were bringing up procrastination. And, if someone says that they want to do something, such as become a CEO by age 35, and, they're not working towards it, that, maybe it is elements of fear, because I guess on the surface level, you might just think, oh, they're just procrastinating, or maybe, they're just not working hard enough. But ultimately, what I got from what you said is that elements of fear could definitely seep into other parts of people's lives and impact what they want to achieve. And I think that's a very valuable message. Is that something that you spoke about on your TEDx talk?
Yeah, so the TEDx talk was really geared towards the title was The Myth of Fearlessness, and giving some fear science, so to kind of raise awareness of the anatomical and physiological reactions that happen in our body, because fear is one of the four basic human emotions. And to say that we should be fearless, or to say that people should try and achieve fearlessness, is really, really unhealthy, because we're never going to be fearless. That's the most ridiculous thing ever, especially
Hmm.
when you think of it in a biological context. Fear has allowed us to get here. Fear has allowed us to be able to survive and to be able to make choices that don't get us killed. So it's like we should be
Absolutely.
thanking fear, right?
Right.
All of us that are listening right now are here because ourselves and our ancestors were all very fearful creatures.
Hmm.
So, high five to y'all for not like jumping off things that will kill you. That's a good
Right.
thing, because you're able to pass your genetic information on to the next generation. But the problem now is we need to relearn how to live in a society where there is so much stimulus. Our brains and our bodies were not meant to live in the type of environment that modern civilized humans live in, of the constant bombardment of information and sensory overload and all of these expectations that we're especially putting on young people. And what I really want to do is give people the strategies to start living and thriving in this environment, because internet's not going away unless there's like an apocalypse. The way that we live is only going to get faster and more competitive. So how do we do it without completely destroying our health and happiness?
And that's the question that you help people to answer.
Well, it's a very big question. So it's very multifaceted, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's part of my work. And the TEDx in particular was really trying to demystify this idea of fearlessness, that
Hmm.
it doesn't exist. Fearlessness is a myth, and it is a lie that people were sold, especially women. And then what happens is, when the only messaging that you get and the only information you get about how to deal with your very human fear is to shove it down and get rid of it, then it comes out sideways. It comes out as shame. It comes out as anger. And instead of just telling people to suck it up and move on, we need to start having conversations that allow people to say, I'm afraid. And, I'm fearful, or I am terrified, or I'm anxious about these different things that are happening in our daily lives, and have strategies to get through that fear zone quicker so that they can get to the good stuff that they want in life in terms of creativity and innovation and strategic decision making.
Well, I think that's really powerful because what you had mentioned about how it could become anger, it could become something else, how if you don't manage the fear, how it can go and just spread out even more in other ways and in productive ways. I think it brings a greater light onto the idea that you have to work with fear and figure out better ways to express it, I guess, because you mentioned creativity. So looking at fear and the modern world and even in the future, at least for me, I feel safe most of the time. And I'm not constantly running from lions, or I'm not always overcoming, my public speaking. I don't public speak as much as you do, but I haven't like gone on stage as many times as other public speakers. So out of curiosity, since we're not running from lions anymore, what do you think stops people, or what do you think causes people to have these fears today, when I would say that the general population is in, if they're living in the United States, if they're living in a good neighborhood, that they're fairly safe?
Well, I think that we, need to take a step back and look at how fear is categorized. So when you say, fear, like it's one of the four basic human emotions, that fear is a very general word. When we start to drill down into it, you can grossly categorize fear in a couple different ways. So you can say that we have what I call a fictional fear versus a factual fear. So just like fiction is like, a fictional book, a fictional story, it might have a nugget of truth in it, but it's something that we make up in our head. And factual fear is something that's happening in the moment. This is something that is going to be part of the collective shared reality of people around us. So factual fear would be something like, even though it's been quite a while since humans were chased by lions, here in North America, but it's, being chased by a lion, right? That's a factual fear. That's something that we don't even need to worry about because our body. So fictional fear is going to be the really exciting part of my work, because that's where the most opportunity is for people to make positive change. So fictional fear is going to have that nugget of truth, something that either happened in our past, something that we're worried about happening in our future, or stories that we've been given by society, or maybe our families, our friends have given to us. And those are the things that we make up in our head. So these are the fears that we're most challenged with in this day and age. And when we take a look at fictional fears, they can be then subdivided into kind of like internal and external fear. So internal fears is going to be something that is about you inside, right? So I'm afraid of not being enough. I'm afraid of not being skinny enough. I'm afraid of not being tall enough. And an external fear would be something like, I'm afraid of spiders. So those are going to be kind of the rough way that we can categorize fear.
Okay, and I hope you don't mind me asking a somewhat challenging question for a second,
Sure.
but I totally agree with you that there's these fictional fears and that there's these real fears. And let's say you were working with someone, or someone wanted to do something challenging, like do public speaking, or go talk to somebody that they want to meet at a park or something. Um, Yet they're saying, okay, I feel scared. This is a real fear. How is this not a fictional fear? What would you say to someone who was, trying to work through that?
Well, I think it's important when we say factual versus fictional, it's not that it's not real to us, right? And when we get into reality, that's a larger conversation of what is and
Hmm.
what is not reality. But when we're watching a movie, even though it's a fictional tale, it's still real. It's still real to us, you know, especially let's say a horror movie. Our brain doesn't know the difference between a, you know, like jump scare in real life, if you will, and a jump scare on a movie where we jump out of our seat and grab our friend and scream.
Right.
You know, this is part of why we like scary movies. So, you know, the idea of reality, it feels real to us, even though it's not something that is directly impacting our ability to survive in that moment. These fictional fears that are worrying about things that have happened, or, you know, like that are not in the present time that could happen, you know, they are very real, and they do feel, you know, quite debilitating at many times to a lot of us. So those are the ones that are going to be kind of in that pool of types of fears. So, you know, everyone, like I said before, is going to have a little bit different challenges in what they're afraid of. But let's say someone is, you know, afraid of talking to someone that they look up to. And, you know, one of the things that they could start to really try and short circuit that fear response is everyone has a little bit different physiological reaction to fear. So for me, I'm a like clencher. So I'll clench my jaw. I clench my like, you know, like shoulders. I'll scrunch them up, and I can get like really like dry mouth, especially if I'm, you know, really nervous about something.
Mhm.
And then another, you know, person might get gastrointestinal issues. They might sweat. They might get clammy hands. So all of those things are going to be really like the physiological responses of fear. And it's important to know what your particular fear responses are.
Mhm.
I'm
Okay.
going to pause there. Yeah, I'm going to pause
Oh,
there because there's
okay.
like a plane going over and it's like
Yeah, I heard
going to be
that.
really loud. I know. I thought it was going to go the other way and I'm like, okay. So I'm going to
Sounds
let
like
it.
it's circling.
I know it's a LA. It's a helicopter, so I'm going to
Right.
let it do
Of
its thing.
course.
I know.
Yeah.
LA and its helicopters.
Go away,
I just let it go
helicopter.
by. Yeah, I know. Okay,
I hear it where I'm at now.
okay.
Must be pretty close.
Right? Oh man. Okay. So really understanding how your body reacts in fear is that first step, because not everyone is going to have the same physiological reactions to fear. And why that's important is as soon as you know your triggers, like your you know, telltale signs, like, oh, my hands are getting clammy, then you can know that it's time to jump into some of the strategies. Now, there's lots of different strategies, and to go through all of them, we'd have to do a full workshop, but I'll, you know, talk about a couple of them that are really
Sure.
quick and easy. And one of those strategies is identifying the exact word for what you're feeling. So many times we say, oh, I'm so stressed, right? We kind of have this like stress badge of courage where we meet their stress and, oh my God, I'm so stressed. But stress, and there's many, you know, pieces of literature that would argue that stress in the way that we define it in modern civilization doesn't exist. That the type of stress that we say is just part of the fear response. And so when we put it in this big innocuous bucket called stress, we're not really addressing it. So one way to kind of in the moment knock ourselves out of that fear response is to get logical about it, to get really specific about what is the thing that we're feeling. So it's very different to feel terrified versus anxious. Those are different things. And I can put a hyperlink to a fear emotions wheel JPEG for your listeners, that they can download and keep on their phone,
Oh,
that I
that's
use
cool.
with my clients. Yeah, and
That's
it's
great.
really useful, and it has all of the different essentially adjectives for all the different ways that we feel fear. And it sounds really simple, but kind of shifting like you would a car, shifting the brain out of that hyper emotional kind of, you know, drive downhill and getting into more of a logical, like, okay, let me assess. Okay, I'm being analytical about it. My body is doing the sweating thing. Okay, I'm starting to breathe weird. Okay, cool. So that's my fear response is starting. Now I'm going to assess what is the exact fear emotion I'm feeling right now. Okay, it's dread. It's dread because my partner hasn't called. He's supposed to be home at 5. It's 7:30. He never is late, never doesn't call me. So now I feel dread, right? That's very different than feeling anxious or overwhelmed. So it's going to be important to really, you know, hone in on the exact word. And just doing that can kind of knock many people out of that fear response. And also another kind of quick and dirty way is when you're in the moment, when you're like, okay, I'm having a fear response. I'm trying to stop this train from like running down the track. Think about the thing that you've been faced with. What's the trigger, right? Even though like triggers become an overused word. Like
Right.
what is the stimulus? Okay, like in science, we use the word stimulus. What's the stimulus that has started this feeling in your body? So when you're in that moment and you've had this event or someone said something that has triggered your fear, taking a moment and trying to put it into one of two boxes, either fear of not enough or fear of losing control. Now, sometimes really complex things happen to us and it's a little bit of both. But in the moment, just try to put it in one of those two boxes. You know, humans are pigeonholers. We love to put stuff in boxes. We have an entire store called the Container Store that
Okay.
allows us to buy boxes to
Yeah,
put stuff in.
absolutely.
We love to organize things, right? And in the moment, if you give your brain some of that box candy to categorize things, it's like, oh, okay, I know how to deal with this.
Hmm.
So, you know, let's say, you know, your partner said something to you like, "Nice dress," right? Like, what was that tone, right? And all of a sudden, your mind is going, "Oh my God, he hates me. He thinks I'm fat. He's probably gonna leave me." Like the just the wheel goes, and all of the stories that we've been telling ourselves in our entire
Sure.
lives start to just run away. And the thing it said wasn't necessarily anything big. It was nice dress, but the tone, what was that tone?
Absolutely.
Um, and, right. And so just pausing in the moment before reacting, which is really hard, something that I continually have to work on because, you know, my instant reaction is, what did you say? Oh, I don't think so. So
Yeah.
for me, I have to like, okay, just take a pause. Does what I'm feeling right now fit into the I'm not enough box or the I don't feel in control box? And in that instance, in this you know, example, it would be I feel not enough. I feel like my dress isn't good enough. I feel I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not skinny enough. Well, all the things that we put into that big box of not enough. And just being able to categorize it and know that these are the two biggest categorizations of pretty much almost all of our fictional fears. Makes you feel not so alone and allows your brain to grab onto something other than the cascading effect of sweeping you away in this tidal wave.
I really appreciate you sharing all of those strategies. And, those are definitely things that you brought up that, sometimes from time to time that I definitely have, and I'm sure others do, is, your thoughts run away with you or you run away with your thoughts and, they just go in all these places where they don't need to be. And, just being in the moment and understanding why you're thinking what you're thinking. I mean, just having that strategy that you mentioned to manage that and understanding whether it's dread or just a little bit of anxiety is just so strong. I mean, that's totally worth it just to learn more about from you. So what got you into all of this research out of curiosity? Was it a public speaking thing or?
No, I mean, I've always been a ham. I grew up on the stage. I started dancing when I was 3 years old. So it was never a fear for me of anything like that. But you know, I was raised by a woman that was really had a lot of fears, especially as I, you know, got into my teenage years and as an adult. And I come from a family that I was the only one out of 5 kids to graduate high school, the only one in my entire family to go to college. And it was really interesting to me as I saw how many decisions were made around fear. And I, you know, really didn't want that to be my life. And so in my early 20s, I, you know, was thinking about how can I develop myself and create a better life for myself that's going to be different than my family's, as many people do at that age. And it really brought me to this kind of underlying thread of decisions and behaviors all revolving around fear. And as academic, I, you know, hit the books and really started to see that there wasn't a lot being done. There wasn't a lot being talked about around non-clinical fear. Now, if you had an extreme phobia, if you had extreme anxiety, well, then sure, there were options that you could get treatment in a doctor's office. But what about everyone else? What about all the things that are just an everyday thing? It doesn't mean that you are, you know, having so much challenge that you need medical support, but you do need some support. kind of like, be like with your human bodies at all. Sometimes you need medical intervention, right? Sometimes you need antibiotics, and sometimes you just need to go to bed. Depends what's going
Just get
on,
some nice sleep.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So like, you don't always need an antibiotic. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you just need to go to sleep. And like,
Get some
and
rest.
right. So there's different levels of what we're dealing with our human bodies, and it's not always something that needs an intervention with a doctor. Sometimes it's just something to relearn how to human, and we don't have a lot of good information out there on how to human, and I want to change that. So, and in an evidence-based way, because I feel that, a lot of times you'll have people that will share information, and even though their heart might be in the right place, their science is non-existent, and that's a problem. So, coming from a very traditional science background, I want to be that person that bridges the gap between the science based information and how it can be applicable to people's daily lives.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. And I think it's wonderful because you're able to, it sounded like you overcame a lot of your own personal challenges. And I'm guessing that, did you happen to use a lot of the techniques that you knew now, or was it like just testing, or how did that come about?
So yeah, I just try to use a lot of techniques that will be really easy to remember. Because if there's a technique, if it's a bunch of steps or really complicated, people are not going to remember it when they're in the throes of a fear reaction. They're not going to use it, and then there's no point to that tool. So I try to take what's in the literature and make it something that's fun, easy, really something that people can have easy access to. Like my fear emotions wheel that I created. That's a JPEG you can keep on your phone. Everyone always has their phone with them. It's something easy. You just pull it up, and even those actions of doing a behavior differently
Hmm.
can dramatically decrease your fear and anxiety reaction in that moment.
I am totally looking forward to seeing that. And just one more thing. So a lot of this has been about fear and management of fear, and understanding the differences between what it means to want to be fearless versus managing your fears better. When you overcome these fears, or when you use the tools that you provide to people, or the strategies that you share in your workshop, what do you see people accomplishing afterwards?
I think the biggest thing is a paradigm shift in how you're thinking about fear. It's not something that we're going to fight. It's not something that we're going to destroy. It's like something we're going to overcome. But it's really more about mastery. So just like anything else that is an art form, that you want to become a master of, it doesn't mean that you ever stop learning about it. And it doesn't mean that you become perfect or you get rid of all of the things that were a struggle in the beginning. That fear is something that will always be a part of everyone's life, whether you like it or not. Now, changing your relationship with fear is the most important thing, and acknowledging that you even can, that you
Hmm.
can have this ability to not be so afraid all the time, or not let fear stop you from doing and living the life that you want, and the one that you love. That's really the overarching goals, but really coming to terms with, you're never getting rid of your fear, and it's going to take practice, because that's just how it is. And that's generally not what people want to hear, because everyone wants the easy fix. And that's why people love to hear people tell them, you can be fearless. All you got to do is, take this pill or buy this book.
Hmm.
And they do this one thing, they're really inspired, and then don't do anything with it ever again. And they're exactly the same place that they were before. So it was, it's kind of like junk food or like popcorn. Popcorn's yummy, and you're like enjoying it after you're enjoying it while you're eating it, but it's not giving you anything. It's not, like making you
Uh-huh.
healthier. And so, really getting into that idea of,
You're
it's
gonna
it's
make
a
me scared of
practice. And
popcorn.
yeah, although I had popcorn for breakfast, so
Oh,
yeah,
nice,
true story.
delicious.
Yeah, I know. Like healthy eating over here. So it's one of those things that, for me, having people feel like they have more influence in the direction of their life,
Hmm.
and feel empowered to make changes in parts of their brain and parts of their behavior that they've always felt a victim to.
Hmm.
That's the biggest takeaway, is empowering people to know that there are science-based strategies that they can implement right now to change how they feel in their daily lives. And the repercussions of that are huge.
Hmm.
Because, what if we could all have a little less fear in our day, not to be fearless, but, be a little less afraid of taking that job in another country, or be a little less afraid of asking for a raise. That, what kind of life could we have if we got to yes a lot more than we stopped at no?
Absolutely. And especially if you bring together more and more people understanding the ideas that you've shared and the strategies, the possibilities are endless. And I want to thank you so much for your time, Mary Poffenroth. I think this was such a valuable podcast episode, and I think people are going to get so much out of it, especially the audience and whatever they're working on to overcome, their own challenges and to just work with their fears better. And can you tell us a little bit about your workshop, just so
Yeah.
the
So
audience?
yeah. So when on the link that I'll send you, that people can download the free JPEG of the fear wheel to put on their phone. There's information on, I work with leaders and organizations to do more hands-on immersive workshops that teach these strategies, as well as other strategies that really are about bringing more creativity and innovation and better decision-making into organizations and leadership groups. Because when we are in fear, our prefrontal cortex, which is going to be the part of your brain, if you take your right hand and slap it to your forehead, that's where your prefrontal cortex is at. And that's where all the magic of being a human happens. So this is where we create our stories. This is where we are able to come up with those amazing ideas for the next product or the next project or the next book that we're going to write. And that goes completely offline when we're in fear. So if we
Ooh.
want those innovative ideas, if we want to make that movie, if we want to make that project better than it could be, then we need to deal with our fear. Otherwise, we're not going to have the brain capacity to get where we want to go.
And you just brought in a very, scientific way of expressing that, managing the prefrontal cortex and all that. That blew my mind. But thank you so much. And everybody listening, thank you for listening. That was Mary Poffenroth. And Mary, if you have any last words for this podcast or ending words, go ahead.
No, just I'd say that keep practicing and keep using strategies to deal with the things that are holding you back from living the life that you say that you want, living the life that you know you are ready to have and to experience, because we all have a terribly short amount of time on this planet, and hopefully we are all out there wanting to do good, and we can do more good when we're not so hung up on our own stories.
Thanks so much, Mary. And have a great day, everybody.